Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Horan, and I run Book Lovers Gourmet in Webster, Mass. And in honor of National Poetry Month and Independent Bookstore Day, we're happy to present Poetry Hors d'oeuvres featuring 3 Worcester area poets. And our first poet is Curt Curtin. He is a first-generation Irish-American poet. Both of his parents emigrated from County Kerry at the beginning of the 20th century, taking different routes but finding one another in Boston. Curt's newest collection, Kerry Dancers, captures many ways that Irish settlers attempted to retain their heritage while also assimilating into American culture. The book is published by Kelsey Books, which also published his first full-length collection called For Art's Sake. Curt also has 3 chapbooks and has won local awards for poetry, including the Connecticut River Review Poetry Contest and the Frank O'Hara Award from the Worcester County Poetry Association. He was twice named a Pushcart Prize nominee and has been a featured reader at many events in Massachusetts and also in Ireland. So please join me in welcoming Curt Curtin and his wife, Dee O'Connor.
Hi, I'm Dee, and I'm on because I want to explain that Curt has for many years been a wonderful reader of poetry, but because he's now visually impaired, he has difficulty reading his own poems aloud in a public reading. And so we're going to share 2 poems that we've recorded Curt's voice, and then I will read the 3rd poem. So the first poem, and all the poems come from 2 different collections that are very graciously being sold in Book Lovers Gourmet, so you're welcome to access them. And the first one is from a book called For Art's Sake, and the poem has an introduction by Curt. So we're gonna pull up the video. Okay, so this poem called Abduction at the Gardner, if you've heard the Netflix series, This is a Robbery, this is in reference to the big theft at the Gardner Museum. So I'm going to turn on the sound now.
Years ago, when I was 15, I went to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. One of the special delights that I had was with a particular painting, The Fisherman on the Sea of Galilee. It was a wonderful, bright painting, and it was also about fishermen on the sea, and I am a Boston-born person who also enjoyed the ocean. That was when I was 15, and later, after hearing about a theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I went back and was very saddened to see that Fisherman on the Sea of Galilee was one of several that had been stolen. They were ripped out of their frames or cut out of their frames. Very rough work, and it has not been solved even yet. So we have no idea where those paintings are. Abduction at the Gardner. I miss the fisherman most, the ghost of peace, beneath the heave of boat and wave, on the wild sea of Galilee. It got to my teenage blood years ago, how they hung on the lines in the grip of fear, where sails whipped in wild air, how each detail rang so true to a boy who loved the sea. Perhaps if they stole just one, I could believe romantically that someone loved it so, He made a crypt, climate-controlled, and lit much better than Gardner's wall. And there he sits alone, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I. His selfish satisfaction, thus a little redeemed. But they stole more, Rembrandt and Vermeer, and other precious work, thugs who cut them from their frames. They only saw expensive rags a buyer might reclaim for something under market. Ignorance of awe wed to sordid souls. I saw blank frames and will not look again. Galileo still delights, Della Robbia too, hidden in the murky hall. Raphael in all the grilled and dark-beamed sights, the chill of wonder in sweet passage all around the atrium. Some day, before my sight is claimed by the thief time sends at last, I hope to stand by Galilee, rescued and returned. In that tumultuous frame, I will again see peace beneath the heat waves.
So you're next now.
Okay.
Now you're up.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. The book cover has my father and mother on there. They came, of course, from Ireland and in two different boats. They had to get over here one at a time, and then met back in the United States. And of course, all that followed after it was their marriage and children. I'm among them. So they're wonderful people, and they did one thing that I enjoyed very much, and many other people enjoyed, was they went to the county club, the Irish County Club on Hibernian Hall in Roxbury. And there they would meet with others who came over from Ireland by various means and were happy to be in the United States. And as citizens, they began to talk about the issues around Boston especially, but the United States generally. So I went there as a child. My parents simply took me along. It gave me a seat there, and I sat and listened, and then got to know a lot of the people there. And so it was a wonderful experience.
Sing the title song.
I'm sorry?
Sing the title song.
Oh, yes.
Tell them the title.
Oh, to think of the Kerry dances, or the ring of the piper's tune. Oh, for one of those days of wonder, gonna lose like youth too soon.
So the next poem is from the Kerry Dancer book, and it's about the county clubs.
The County Kerry Men's and Women's Benevolent Association, Boston's old Hibernian Hall, was a many-chambered Irish hive, and the buzz inside the meeting rooms was lively talk of politics and memories and love of people one could trust. The door was shut, the gavel rapped, and matters grave as a family's name, or light as to who's to make the raisin cake and tea, were handled in a parliamentary vein. You had to be a member or a guest to get inside. For these were folk who knew of British betrayal. So the double doors with flatted eye and passwords to deny the prying Yankee, I suppose, who never seemed to try. The sergeant-at-arms was posted by the door, prepared to repel Boston Bluenose, one might suppose, come to interrupt the dancing, banned in a land that claimed the name of freedom. When the business and argument was done, and women went in back to heat the tea, someone would ask Sister Donovan to sing. Then, in kindness and the loyalty, they also asked a song of Sister Flynn. A patched and ragged squeeze box was brought out. Oh, the dancing that began would shake the hall as heavy men and women took to reeling round the floor. They did the rakes of mallow and filled the fluter's ball. Where's a toot of the flute and a twiddle of the fiddle? We're hopping in the middle like a heron on the griddle, and just up, down, dance around, all around the hall. On hadn't we the gaiety that filled the flute's ball? And even the sergeant-at-arms joined in. Indeed, when all the halls were at the dancing time, the music had to ring to Beacon Hill to make the sober Yankees sing.
And finally, the last poem we'll share is called Katie and the Poet. And Katie is a character in Carrie Dancers who's actually a fictional character. Curt particularly likes to hear this one read in a woman's voice, which is why I'm reading it tonight. Isn't he grand? The man has such a way with words. How they flow like God's own thoughts from somewhere you wouldn't be likely to know. And he does it all with bits of talk scattered around like a broken mirror, instead of a sentence you could read all at once. It's deep, he is, and learned in things you wouldn't understand any more than a goat in church. Ah, but wasn't that a grand poem he wrote, full of words I haven't heard more than twice in my life? And he read it all with such wonderful feeling, you'd swear to God he was a priest. My John was making eyes all the while, but I can tell you I was deeply moved. The whole thing flowed like water over a dam. A river of words, and not a one of them too plain. I wasn't all that sure of his meaning, but I get the drift, as they say, of fog in the morning. We shouldn't be too proud, you see, pretending to know all the deep things a man like that could say. Still, I wonder, does he talk that way all the time? It must be a fine headache for his wife to be always thinking, what does he mean? And does he expect an answer? Thank you.
Thank you, Curt and Dee. That was a wonderful reading. And now we'll move on to John Gaumond. He is also a Worcester poet, photographer, and gardener, and also professor emeritus at Fitchburg State University. He led a poetry writing workshop at Borders Bookstore for 5 years, and his poetry has been published in various publications around the Worcester area: the Connecticut River Review, Sahara, Worcester Magazine, Poets in the Galleries, among others. And he also received the Jacob Knight Poetry Award in 2006. His photographs have appeared in the Worcester Review, Diner, Ballard Street, River Valley Current, the Worcester Telegram, and Worcester Magazine, and also in my shop in various shows. His photograph Flower Pots, Sienna number 3, was selected for the 2014 Art in the City program, which is based in Worcester. So please join me in welcoming John Gaumond.
Okay. Go ahead. My first poem is called Webster, Massachusetts, 1904. And the reason I'm reading it is, first of all, I'm in a Webster setting right now. And the poem was the very first poem that I ever had published. And so it's called Webster, Massachusetts, 1904. My mother was only 12 the day her father disappeared. He left for work at the shoe factory, as he'd done 6 mornings a week for almost 20 years. When he didn't come home that evening, my grandmother walked 4 blocks to the Bates Shoe Company. With each step, her fear grew as cold as the waiting supper. No person could be found who had seen them that day. Was it disaster or dream that lifted him like the morning fog from his family? Each night for a month, a place was set for him. The meal was eaten in silence. Minds and hearts questioned that which no voice could explain. That was my poem relating to family. The next poem is, as a gardener, I'm fortunate to have learned the art of building dry stone walls. Hundreds of feet surround our gardens. And this is called Looking at Stones. I gaze upon the glacial farm like a prehistoric hunter, looking not for weapon or tool, but for stone to build a wall. A crop cultivated by erosion sown across the field, metamorphic, igneous, sedimentary, products of nature, stone cold, rock hard. I begin my harvest, granite, schist, quartz, large solid stones for the base, flat, smooth rocks to cap the top. On each trip from field to foundation, I wonder, is it a rock or a stone I gather? Point of shovel or blade of plow cannot distinguish rock from stone. Did David fell Goliath with a rock or a stone? I wonder if it's a rock or a stone I gather. Upon this rock, Christ said, "Who will cast the first stone?" he asked. Religion offers no solution. Demosthenes used stones to cure his stuttering. Those who view the Gorgon's head turn to stone. Arthur settled his birthright by drawing Excalibur from a stone. Literature gives stone power and nobility. What fool would say head rock, grave rock, or tomb rock, or use a mill walk to grind grain? Would one travel to Rockhenge, the stone of Gibraltar, or admit to kissing the Blarney Rock? Function may give form to meaning, or speech may determine rock or stone. With no stone left unturned, I stand in the rubble of my ruminations. And that's my poem regarding my art. Now, as far as favorite poems go, I have many, but this one, because of my training and Sunday school and Catholic upbringing, I was well aware of the 7 deadly sins. And so I love to play with words. And so as a result of this, my poem is called Shopping at the Deadly 7. As you shop the supermarket of life, avoid aisles of anger, evade end caps of envy, shun shelves of sloth, stand clear of greed. Push aside pride, glide from gluttony, detour the deli of desire. Crave not the contents of other carts. At checkout on Judgment Day, your soul, clear of selections from the seven, will pass through the express line to heaven. If the barcode of your life, imprinted with evil selections, slides over the celestial scanner, producing a tape of transgressions exceeding your line of good choices, go to the service desk of purgatory or the parking lot of hell. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that wonderful reading. And finally, I'd like to introduce another Worcester poet, Judith Ferrara, who happens to be John's wife. She is also a writer and visual artist, and her poetry, essays, and artwork have been published in 3 collections: Little O, The Earth Travel Journals, A Brush with Words, and also Gestures of Trees, as well as in other journals, the Black Fly Review, the Comstock Review, Portland Review Literary Journal, and the Worcester Review. In 2009, she began a study of poet Stanley Kunitz and continues to do research on his family and Worcester-based poems. Since 1998, her art has been shown in group and solo exhibitions, including again at the Book Lovers Gourmet. She has a website you can visit if you'd like to look at more of her work. It's paletteandpen.com, paletteandpen.com. You can read the complete collection of her journals there, and also check out her monthly blog on her creative process. So welcome, Judith, and we'll turn the floor over to you for your poems.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'd just like to thank you on behalf of all the visual artists and the writers, all the years, 26, I believe, that you have, and you are an artist in your own right, that you have given artists and writers a chance to have their work seen and appreciated, and you've been just such a great addition to the artistic community, and I just want to acknowledge that today. I think that's really important. The Little O, the Earth is one of the books that is at Deb's and the Book Lovers Gourmet. And what I did with those journals Debbie was just talking about on my website, Judy's Journals, is I collected all of them that were about travel. And John and I have been very fortunate to have traveled over these many years. And so in this book, there are 21 journals, and then I did a series of ink drawings to go with each particular journal and country. And then at the end, I also gathered 21 poems over these many years that I have written poetry about travel. And so I'd like to share tonight a poem called Hotel Tapestry. And it was inspired by a visit to Rome. And we all know that Rome is just an absolutely wonderful installation of art and architecture and food and people and everything, just so grand and beautiful. And so this is called Hotel Tapestry. Goose tucked under her arm, a sturdy peasant strides toward the village. The folds of her skirt swing in silent rhythm, a dagger peeking from under her apron. Dust on her cherry cheeks. On the horizon, the Colosseum sits in dumb grandeur. Guard at the elevator with his helmet and sword chased with fake gold. Bruised chin, smile with a front tooth missing. Comes an offer to pose with him. Battle-worn special effects, €2. And not a cloud in the lobby. Walk outside. The streets teem with torches and pickpockets. A gypsy holds her apron taut. A few coins jump, catch your eye. Scab on her hand. On the ground, a rotten apple pulls you into its stink. Your eyes, radiant with alabaster and rain. Your suitcase filled with clean clothes. Rome, a pyramid of limes next to a bin of red grapes. A jet approaches Leonardo da Vinci. Birds scream in the trees. And that was my art poem. And this, in a sense, it's so many of my poems are really filled with allusions to art. This is from another book that is also available at Deb's, and it is called A Brush with Words. And you can tell by the title that every poem in this collection has art references. And I'd like to read Purchased at the Provincetown Public Library yard sale. And I do have tonight the book that caught my eye at the yard sale on the lawn of the Provincetown Public Library. And I bought it, and the poem talks about why I did that, why I was able to be attracted to this book. My mother was a seamstress, and during the Depression, she was the only one in the family who could get a job and worked at a factory making dresses. And this is the story of that. Purchased at the Provincetown Public Library yard sale. Its cover gradually giving up, shrugging off the photograph of a dark-haired woman sitting at a machine, her head tipped toward jaws of black enamel, made me want to spend 50 cents to save this paperback so I could find someone who looked the way my mother did when she posed for the photographer at her Singer. Made me go home and find the 1939 clipping, my mother's picture in the Courier Express. Busy hands in Buffalo at the Barnard Dress Manufacturing Company. Made me remember our sewing machine and one pink organza dress lurking among the others she made for me. The ones I never asked for because I wanted store-bought, except that time when I knew there wasn't money for my graduation dress. And so, to do her a favor, I bought 3 patterns to show her the neckline from one, sleeves from the second, and skirt and bodice from the third. Made me remember the way the light went out in her eyes when I asked, "Can you do this?" I knew that she would wail and cry as the needle bound up on a seam, while undigested cloth came back into her hands. Made me read the clipping again, perky report cheering on some 400 workers who turned out 24,000 dresses each week. Made me see my mother at her 12-needle machine, feeding it cloth to gather, trim, and shear. Made me finally understand the cost of organza, wretched and pink. And the kind of favorite poem that I picked for my final poem is my most recent poem, and it had to do with seeing a little presentation about the artist Francisco Goya, 16th and 17th century artist. And It became a poem not only about him, he at the end of his life traveled to Bordeaux, France from Spain. He was a court painter in Spain, but he was stone deaf at that point. But he kept working. He kept working until the very end. So this really became a poem for me about aging and about creativity and what will happen to that eventually in our aging lives. Goya writes a note to himself. Picture Goya in his later years, stone deaf, on a visit to France. In his silent cocoon, he sketches a man observed that morning at the market, adding touches of the one reflected in the mirror at his elbow. Every line is drawn with affection, not old before his time, just old. Gnarled face, rheumy eyes. In the upper right-hand corner, Goya writes a note to himself. I will never stop learning. I know that hunger, that thirst, the prospect of famine in us all. Thank you, and thank you, Deb.
Thank you all for reading and sharing your poetry again with us. And hopefully we will see, I'm hoping to have more events in the future in the store. So please keep an eye out for that. And we will wish you all a good night.